The desert sun does not forgive. By noon, the sand reaches 140 degrees. The air shimmers above the rocks as if the earth itself is on fire. There is no shade, no water for miles, and somewhere among the red canyons of the American Southwest, a mother carries her child on her back. She doesn't run. Running wastes water, and water here is worth more than gold. She walks, calculated, precise. Her eyes scan the horizon for something only she can see: the subtle green of an agave hidden among the stones, the shadow of a crevice in the rock where her family can rest until sundown. In this video, I use AI tools to recreate the Apache world, bringing to life landscapes, moments of survival, and scenes that no camera was ever there to capture. The goal isn't to rewrite history, but to stand inside it, as to feel the heat of the desert and the weight of a people's fight to protect their own. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why the Apache are still here, and why that matters more than ever. This is Apache land, and surviving here demands more than strength. It demands an intelligence honed over centuries, generation after generation, passed down in stories whispered around fires that couldn't burn too bright. Because in this desert, being seen could mean death. The name Apache isn't theirs. It came from the Zuni, a neighboring people, and means something close to enemy. But the Apache called themselves something else: Inde, the people. And these people were not one. They were many: Chiricahua, Mescalero, Jicarilla, Lipan, Western Apache. Each group adapted to a different corner of a vast territory stretching from southern Colorado to the mountains of Mexico. What united them wasn't a border, it was a way of seeing the world. For the Apache, the land wasn't property, it was teacher. Every mountain, every dry riverbed, every animal track told a story, and whoever could read those stories would have food, water, and protection. Whoever couldn't wouldn't last a single season. Children learned this before they learned to speak. Imagine an Apache child at 4 years old. She doesn't yet know how to ride a horse, doesn't yet know how to use a bow, but she already knows how to stay absolutely silent for hours because her mother taught her that silence can save a life. She already knows how to recognize poisonous plants by smell alone. And she already knows that if an adult raises their hand in a quick gesture, she must crouch and disappear among the rocks, without asking why. Apache childhood wasn't what we imagine childhood to be. There was no separation between play and learning. Games were training, stories were maps, and the first heroes a child knew weren't distant figures. They were her own grandmother, her own uncle, her own father, who had survived the desert, the hunger, and the enemies. The Apache didn't raise children to be happy. They raised children to be alive. The Sonoran Desert is one of the most hostile places in North America. In summer, temperatures exceed 115 degrees under a sun that seems to have physical weight. In winter, nights plunge to near freezing at higher elevations. Rain, when it comes, falls all at once, transforming dry ravines into deadly rivers that vanish within hours, leaving behind only mud and thirst. There is no margin for error. A twisted ankle could mean abandonment. A rattlesnake bite could mean 3 days of agony before the end. A contaminated water source could kill an entire family, and yet for more than 1,000 years, the Apache didn't just inhabit this place. They turned it into a fortress. The key was movement. While other peoples built stone cities and depended on agriculture, the Apache remained in constant flux. Their homes, the wickiups, were structures of genius simplicity, frameworks of flexible branches covered with grass, leaves, or hides that could be assembled in less than 2 hours and abandoned without regret. It wasn't poverty, it was strategy. A people who don't attach themselves to a place cannot be besieged, cannot be surrounded, cannot be predicted. The Apache moved with the seasons, following the flowering of the agave, the migration of deer, the ripening of cactus fruit. Where a stranger saw desolation, they saw a calendar written across the landscape. In March, the flowers of the saguaro cactus. In June, the fruit of the yucca. In September, piñon nuts in the mountains. Each month had its food, its region, its rhythm. And children learned this rhythm like they learned their own breath. But the desert wasn't the only danger. The Apache lived surrounded. To the south, the Spanish Empire advanced with horses, firearms, and diseases that killed entire villages before a single soldier fired a shot. To the north and east, other indigenous peoples, Comanche, Navajo, Pima, competed for the same scarce resources. Later came the Mexicans, then the Americans. Every Apache generation grew up knowing that war wasn't a possibility. It was a certainty, and this shaped everything. Boys were trained to run long distances with mouths full of water, without swallowing, to learn control over their own bodies. They were woken in the middle of the night and thrown into freezing rivers so they'd learn to react to shock without panic. They learned to track an animal for days, to move without leaving traces, to read an enemy's behavior by the way he held his weapon. Girls learned all of this too, because among the Apache, defending the family wasn't exclusively men's work. Women like Lozin, a Chiricahua warrior who fought alongside Geronimo, were revered not as exceptions, but as proof that protecting children required every available hand. There's a story the Apache told their children. It speaks of a time when the people were surrounded by monsters, giant creatures that devoured anyone who dared go out to hunt or fetch water. The Apache were starving, trapped by fear. Then the twin warriors were born, sons of the sun and an Apache woman. They grew quickly because time was short, and when they were ready, they went out to face the monsters, one by one, not with brute force, but with intelligence. Each monster had a weakness, and the twins learned to find it. In the end, the world was safe, not because the monsters had disappeared. Some still existed, transformed into lesser dangers, like hunger and cold, but because the people now knew that every monster can be defeated if you know how to observe. This story wasn't entertainment, it was curriculum. Apache knowledge wasn't stored in books, it was stored in people. The elders were living libraries. Each one carried decades of memory about where to find water in drought years, how to treat an infected wound, which canyons offered escape, and which were traps. Losing them wasn't just losing a family member, it was losing entire chapters of the people's survival history. That's why, in moments of flight, the Apache did something that horrified their enemies. They prioritized the elders and the children. Warriors stayed behind, sacrificing themselves if necessary to ensure that knowledge and future escaped together. The Spanish thought this was cowardice. They didn't understand. Protecting those who carry the past and those who represent the future isn't retreat. It's the most sophisticated form of victory. It's ensuring that even if this battle is lost, the war will continue for another generation. The Apache world was matrilineal. This means a child's identity came from the mother, not the father. When a man married, he went to live with his wife's clan. The older women made decisions about where to camp, when to leave, how to divide resources. This wasn't a cultural detail, it was survival engineering. In a world where men could die on any hunt, in any ambush, the family's stability couldn't depend on them. The maternal clan was the anchor. It guaranteed that even if a father never returned, the child would have uncles, grandparents, cousins, a network of protection impossible to destroy with a single arrow. Apache mothers carried more than children. They carried entire civilizations on their backs. And then came centuries of war. First the Spanish, with their thirst for silver and souls. Then the Mexicans, offering bounties for Apache scalps, including those of women and children. Finally, the Americans, with their infinite hunger for land and their policy of extermination disguised as pacification. The Apache resisted like no other people on the continent. For 300 years, they turned every mountain into a fortress, every canyon into a trap. Warriors like Cochise and Mongus Coloradus inflicted humiliating defeats on professional armies, using nothing but knowledge of the terrain and an absolute refusal to surrender. Geronimo, whose real name was Goyakla, one who yawns, led a group of just 38 people, including women and children, and against 5,000 American soldiers and 3,000 Mexicans. For months, he evaded them, attacked them, vanished. Not because he was invincible, but because every child in his group had been trained since birth for exactly that moment. Geronimo's surrender in 1886 wasn't the end of the Apache. It was the end of an era. The survivors were sent to reservations in Florida, Alabama, Oklahoma, places so far from their mountains that many died of longing before they died of disease. Children were torn from families and sent to boarding schools where speaking their language, singing their songs, remembering who they were was forbidden. The goal was clear: kill the Apache without killing the body. But memory is more resilient than flesh. In dark dormitory rooms, children whispered stories in forbidden languages. Grandmothers hid knowledge in songs that seemed innocent. And when grandchildren asked about the past, there was always someone who remembered. Today, the Apache are still here. On reservations in Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, more than 100,000 people identify as Apache. They drive cars, use cell phones, work in offices. But they also perform ceremonies that are 1,000 years old. They teach their children the language that was forbidden. And they look at the mountains of the Southwest knowing that land is still theirs. Not by law, but by belonging. The desert hasn't changed. It's still brutal, still relentless, still kills those who don't respect it. And maybe that's why the Apache survived when so many expected them to disappear. They were forged by the same fire they faced. While each generation passed to the next, not just hunting techniques or water routes, but something deeper, the conviction that it's possible to look at the impossible and refuse to die. In the Apache language, there's no exact word for goodbye. Farewells are temporary. You don't say, "I'll never see you again." You say something like, "Until we meet again." Maybe that explains everything. A people who don't believe in permanent endings cannot be exterminated. They can be defeated, scattered, nearly forgotten. But somewhere, a mother still tells the story of the twin warriors to a child falling asleep under the same sky her ancestors saw 100 generations ago. And as long as that story is told, the Apache will be alive, not as relics of a distant past, but as living proof that human beings, when they need to protect what they love, are capable of things the desert could never destroy. The sun sets behind the Chiricahua Mountains, the air cools, and somewhere, a child learns to read the stars. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we uncover the untold survival stories that history tried to bury. Drop a comment below. Which indigenous nation should we explore next?